All right. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Lunch and Learn, the community paper. My name is Jeremy Heilman. I am the Assistant Curator of Collections here at the History Center. I want to welcome everybody joining us here in person and also everyone joining us on the live webinar. We'll be sure to leave some time at the end for questions. For those of you who are here in person, there are some Post-its on the table and some pencils, so feel free to write down your questions, and then those will be collected at the end. And then for those of you who are joining us online, if you want to leave your comments in the chat, Cheyenne can relay those to us at the end. So as the name suggests today, we are going to be discussing the community paper, which is a publication that has long covered the happenings of the downtown area, starting in College Park and expanding into the other sort of surrounding neighborhoods around here. The History Center contributes a monthly article, so we're going to talk about that and share some of the highlights over the years. But before we get started, we want to learn a little bit about the origins and the history of the paper itself. And to help us with that, we have a very special guest, Debbie Gunter, the owner and publisher of the community paper. So welcome her.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. This is so special to be here. I am Debbie Gunter. I purchased the community paper back in 2010, which was kind of a crazy story because I have no background in journalism. I was minding my own business as a realtor, working full-time. But the founder of the paper, Susan Tatour, started the paper in 1989. And she came to me and she said, it doesn't matter that you don't know anything about journalism or laying out a paper. What matters is that you're connected to the community. And okay, if you say so. But that's what got her, in the very beginning to start this paper. She would walk around in College Park and downtown and kind of get to know business owners and neighbors. And she thought, the only news we have is it's all bad news, car wrecks and, stabbings or whatever. And so she also did not have any journalism experience, but decided that she thought she knew enough about, laying out some pages that she could put together a community paper. So she started that back in 1989. It was just her. She was doing everything herself, writing the articles, making the ads for the businesses, and she had her husband and her son help her roll the papers in little bags, and she would throw them in driveways. She started out with 1,500 papers because that's all they could manage. And then, over the years, she would get helpers to come, and by the time I purchased the paper, she was delivering 8,000 papers, but in the little bags, still thrown in the driveway. And so I used to advertise in the paper. I was a full-time realtor, and I would get so angry when it would rain and the papers were in those bags and they would fill up with water. And I was like, oh, they're ruined. There went my advertising money. So when she approached me, I said, let me think about this because the only way I will do this is if I can afford to mail them. And so I did some research and found out about every door direct mailing, and it was definitely more affordable than me paying someone to go throw them in the driveways because I didn't have time for that. And so we began mailing the paper. Started out just in College Park. She had originally tried covering some downtown and like Ivanhoe area, but it just didn't pan out because she didn't live there and it was tough. So when I purchased it, it was just College Park, which was great because I was super involved in the community, PTA mom, Main Street president, all that good stuff. And so I loved every minute of it. When I bought it, it was just me. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. My daughter was in college at the time learning InDesign, which is a layout program. And so she's like, I can help you, Mom. So the first probably 6 papers, they were full of typos, and I'm mortified sometimes when I see the first one. I can't believe that I actually mailed that to 8,000 people. So it was, but I kind of joked about it in my letter from the editor and said, just bear with me, I'm learning and I'll figure it out. So over the years, I started realizing that this was a lot of work putting out this paper, and Susan just worked so tirelessly. I don't know how she did it. She was always at every event taking photos, and so I was trying to live up to how she had done the job, But it was really difficult for me. I had 3 kids, and I was working as a realtor still. So luckily, I knew a lot of people, and so I convinced, like the neighborhood association president to send in news. I convinced the PTAs to send in news, and just different people throughout the community to start being sort of the eyes and ears and sending me the stuff, so I didn't have to do everything. And then over time, the paper got better, so I got more advertisers than I could afford an actual copy editor, which I know everyone really appreciated, and I didn't have to be quite so embarrassed all the time. And then now we had an appreciation party last night, and we had 15 people who we honored who work on the paper, not including myself and my partner Nick, who's here today, who's our managing editor. So I'm really proud of how far we've come. We now work very closely with UCF. We have interns there every semester, and several of them have gone on to work for us after they graduate part-time. We have some right now even who are freelancing for us, and it's been fun to watch their journey as one is now with Fox News, one is the managing editor at a newspaper in South Carolina, and we all stay close. We're like a little family. So that's been really special to me, to give these interns an opportunity to actually write, not just do the mundane stuff that no one else wants to do at some of the other media outlets. And so it's a great opportunity for them. And one more thing that I'm really proud of, Susan started the paper with this in mind, that she wanted to just share positive news, because there were enough people doing a great job of, and it is important, obviously, that we know what's going on in our community, but she wanted to keep it focused on good news, positive things, and so we've carried that on. We don't do restaurant reviews, or our policy is we're not going to publish anything that would hurt someone, whether it's a business owner or a resident or someone who's just working hard and nonprofit and doing the best they can. And so we shine a spotlight on the good news and all of the really neat people who live and work and the heads of the nonprofits in Orlando. Back in 2017, I thought, people want to know what's going on downtown too, not just College Park. So I had the brilliant idea to start another newspaper called the Downtown Community Paper. And about a year into that, I realized this is really hard, and we have a lot of crossover news. We have a lot of crossover advertisers. The advertisers were excited because they were getting their message out to a new crowd, the downtown people who would still come to College Park. But there was a lot of crossover. So in 2019, I decided to merge them into one and just go back to the original name of the paper, which is the Community Paper. And so now we cover College Park and also downtown Orlando, from College Park all the way down to Soto. So kind of the Main Street areas in Orlando is kind of what we aim for. We're super big on promoting small business, because we know they just don't have the advertising dollars that bigger companies have. So we do a lot of business spotlights and try to get the word out about them. And we're super excited about our relationship with the History Center. We did have a history writer at one point, and she was amazing, but that was when we were just College Park. So once we expanded into downtown, luckily the History Center agreed, and it's just been a great relationship since back in, I believe, 2017 is when you guys started. And so we're really excited about that. It's been fun for me too, because I was born here and raised here, and it's been fun that some of the articles you guys send in, it's like, oh my gosh, I remember that. So it's really special. We cover school news. We love it when we hear from the parents of kids who saw their picture in the paper and they get so excited. And we just really believe it's important to showcase what the schools are doing as well, because they all work so hard. What else? Is there anything else I'm forgetting about? But we love what we do. We have such a great team, and we're kind of running this as a labor of love, really. And so we always welcome input from the community. That's how we find out about a lot of our stories. So if you haven't heard about the paper before, we have some on the tables for you. I hope you'll take a chance and check it out. And if you guys hear some great news happening in this downtown area, feel free to shoot me an email, and maybe it's something we might cover. Does anybody have any questions about the paper? I do a little bit, but I try not to. I do it for like my kids and close friends, and if my husband and I buy something or whatever, yeah. But yeah, hard to give that up totally. Anybody else? Well, thanks for listening, you guys. I'm glad you're here today, and I can't wait to see what else is to come. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Debbie. We really appreciate that. And we'll have time at the end if you have any questions that you think of for Debbie that you didn't address there. So specifically right now, I want to talk about, as Debbie mentioned, and I did earlier as well, our kind of relationship with the paper. Every month, the History Center contributes an article called The Way We Were. The pieces cover a variety of topics, all related to local history. Basically, the area that the paper itself is distributed in, like Debbie mentioned, so downtown and kind of the surrounding major neighborhoods. Since 2017, the History Center staff has contributed almost 90 articles to the community paper. Everything from sort of physical locations downtown and in the area, like hotels, restaurants, stores of sort of a bygone era, to notable people who have lived or visited the area. So we have a few of those up here. I just kind of want to run down some of the notable things and let you know kind of the wide variety of topics covered. So some of the people that have been written about in the Way We Were article are Bessie Coleman, Amelia Earhart, both very notable aviators, astronaut John Young, a moonwalker and commander of the first space shuttle mission, who grew up in this area and in College Park. Walt Disney, of course, who announced that his company would be coming to Florida during a press conference at the Cherry Plaza Hotel just down the street. Joseph Breckner, a journalist and local TV personality for which our research center upstairs is named. Lyndon Johnson, the 36th President of the United States. Roberto Clemente, humanitarian and Hall of Fame baseball player, and of course Martin Luther King Jr., who visited Orlando to speak with the congregation at Shiloh Baptist Church and also at Tinker Field. So some pretty significant people who had spent some time in Orlando, whether they grew up here or lived here or just visited for a very brief period. There are also some topics that are very near and dear to both the History Center and just the downtown area in general. Right next to us, a block over, is the old Angebuilt Hotel and its architect Murray King, both of which have been covered in the Way We Were article. This room that we're actually in right now is named for Murray S. King, who also designed this building, so kind of a special thing. We also have covered the grand opening of the History Center and a concert that took place out front where they used the actual fountain there as a stage, so kind of a fun little thing pertaining to our history and the building's history. The Albertson Public Library, which was the predecessor to the Orange County Library System, the Orange Avenue Christmas Star, and of course the Lake Eola Fountain, which has become a symbol of the city of Orlando in many different ways. So even if you are a longtime resident or a history buff, there may be things covered in these articles that you may not have heard before. And especially if you're new to the area or just kind of want to better understand the history of downtown, these are kind of easy to read little glimpses and are into some of the more interesting parts of local history. I think one of the key factors that contributes to these articles is that the staff is able to choose the topic. And as Debbie said with her staff, our staff really do consider it an opportunity to both kind of, showcase the research that we do and to, help others kind of understand what we get to kind of explore every day. So a lot of it focused on something that the author is interested in or that they have done prior research on. And because we all have our own facets of the community and culture that we're interested in and find compelling, the subject matter is pretty varied, and we don't necessarily need to police that too much because just our staff naturally is covering a pretty wide variety of topics. We do have a couple of limitations in terms of what we'll write about. The geographical boundaries that I mentioned, and the other is that we have to have some sort of visual representation for the story, like a photo. So generally, this is a chance to show off our collection and our archive, but if somebody is choosing a topic that we don't necessarily have much material on in our actual collection, it's an opportunity for us to pursue and acquire these images or items, which is something that we're always trying to do, identify holes or blind spots in our collection and work to fix that. Because we cover such broad history, you can never have everything, but we want to cover as many of the sort of important stories about the community as possible. And if one person thinks it's important, whether that's a community member or someone on our staff, there's a chance, obviously, that a lot of other people do as well. So today we thought it would be fun to kind of share a few of the articles that our staff has done. Several of the topics that I mentioned have already been part of Lunch and Learns or covered in some kind of other program. So obviously all of the folks that I mentioned earlier are definitely worthy of their own Lunch and Learn or program or something like that. So these are ones that we haven't really extensively covered in the past, so it's a fun little kind of grab bag. And everyone presenting wrote the article that they are discussing, and they are each kind of an interesting piece of local color that hopefully you'll find interesting. So I'm going to pass it off to our first speaker, Kara, who is covering a topic that you may have actually seen on your way into this room. So.
Hi, my name is Kara Kovlev. I'm the collections registrar here at the History Center. And last year I wrote an article titled Bill Bear's Beloved Bears. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it today. So Bill Bear came to Orlando in 1944. And with a borrowed $500, he opened his first radio shop on West Central Boulevard. And he began to slowly expand his business. His career ended up spanning 45 years and 20 locations of Bill Bear TV and radio stores throughout Central Florida and even a little bit into the West Coast. He operated the only complete RCA color TV service center and was the largest RCA color TV retailer in Central Florida. So both of those things earned him the nickname Mr. Color TV, which they used a lot in advertisements. But I want to jump to 1959 when he was expanding his empire and realized that he needed a trademark. And with a last name like Bear, it seemed kind of obvious. So he started putting large taxidermy bears into his stores, and he kind of became known for this around town. When a new store opened, they would get a new bear. So his first bear was Rembrandt, an 8.5-foot Kodiak bear holding a baton. He was first located over in St. Pete for about 5 years and then came to Orlando, moved around a few locations, and finally settled in the Colonial Plaza location. And he was originally just referred to as Bill Bear, but I will get to the name change in a minute. Second, there was Beartoven. He's a 9-foot polar bear, also holding a baton, and he was at the Winter Park Mall location. And when he first arrived in 1964, he was actually named an honorary citizen of Winter Park by the mayor. Then came Schubert. He's a 9-foot polar bear that was at the Altamont Mall location. And lastly, there was Barams, an 8-foot grizzly bear at the Mills Avenue location. So I mentioned that Rembrandt first was just called Bill Bear. But once the second bear came along, Bill realized that they really needed their own names. So to do this, he held a contest, and people could write in and suggest bear names, and they all kind of played off the last name of Bear, B-A-E-R. First place obviously got to name the bear, but they also got an RCA television set. Second place got a trip to the Bahamas, and third place got a radio. And I personally would have gone for that second place. Not first, but that's just me. But some of the names that were written in that I thought were worth noting that didn't win were Lady Baird, William Shakespeare, Aurora Borealis, and Bearlock Holmes. And some of these names get really hard to say, so I didn't include the other ones. But Bill Bear really leaned into this bear theme. So he had his taxidermy bears. He also had a large neon sign of a bear holding a baton on one of his locations. And then at his Mills Avenue location, which was kind of the flagship store, he also had 2 tile mosaics. You can see them up there. One of them is polar bears, and one of them is a trio of black bears. They are 6 feet by 12 feet, and they were done in 1965 by Richard Boone Rogers. That location is now a bridal shop, but the mosaics are still there. Once Bill Bear sold the building, people who owned it after really tried to preserve the tiles and save them from graffiti artists. So they would cover them with signs and advertisements. So they are still there today. You can see them. I've driven by. They're very cute. But in 1979, Bill Bear sold his business to Roger Jones. He wanted to take his bears with him, but he said that his house was too small. So they got left behind. Jones ran the business for about a year, and then he sold to Hal Ehrig. He was a local attorney. And he ran the business for about another year until a really bad robbery cost him over $100,000 in lost merchandise, and he was forced to liquidate. So when he sold off everything, he took Beethoven and Schubert with him to his law firm, and they actually sat outside that building there for a while, until he heard that Bill Bear was looking for his bears in hopes that they would be donated here to us at the History Center. So that's what Hal ended up doing. Beethoven came to us in 1985, and Schubert came in 1994. They are on the first floor across from the elevators. I don't think you can miss them, but please pay them a visit. They're very sweet. So there were 2 other bears that I mentioned. When Hal was forced to liquidate and sell off everything, he wanted to save all 4 bears, but only had room for 2. So the other 2, he sent to a taxidermist in Gainesville who agreed to give them free housing for them, air-conditioned, they were safe, in exchange for being able to use them as an advertisement tool for his business. A little while later, Hal decided he was ready to sell the bears, and he tried to get in contact with the taxidermist, but couldn't. So he drove up to Gainesville and went to the place that he had dropped off his bears, and they were not there, and neither was the taxidermist. He was told that they went out of business and they sold the bears. Obviously, he didn't have the right to sell what wasn't his, but Hal filed a lawsuit against the taxidermist, and the taxidermist just could not remember who he sold them to, and nothing came of it, and unfortunately, they haven't been located to this day. As for Bill Bear, he went on to be recognized for the rest of his life as Mr. Color TV. He was active in the community, and he would come visit his bears here at the History Center pretty often and tell guests all about them. He was very proud of his bears. He even had a small acting career. He was featured in Ernest Saves Christmas. That was filmed here in Orlando. He played a Santa Claus ringing a bell on the street in one of the opening scenes, so that's kind of cool. But he passed away in 2002 at the age of 86. So we here at the History Center, including myself, have spent a very long time trying to track down the 2 missing bears. So much so that I think my coworkers think I'm a little crazy and are probably tired of hearing me talk about it. I did reach out to Hal last year, and he wasn't able to give me any new information, but he is hopeful that someday they will be found, and they will come here to the History Center to be reunited with their brothers. So this is my desperate plea. If anyone knows anything about these bears, please reach out to us and let us know, because I want to bring them home. But thank you. I'm going to pass it along to Emily now.
Okay. But yeah, if you know where these bears are, we will find a place for them here, because Kara is desperate to have them back. All right, so as she said, I'm Emily Coughlin. I'm the collections manager here at the History Center. And in 2023, I wrote about something that I have some personal experience with, a little place that is now called Favo. The article was called Favo, an Unlikely Artist Sanctuary. So we're going to get into the history of that a little bit. So originally, the property was the Davis Park Motel. It was constructed in 1955 by William and Mary Jo Davis. William went by Bill. And they were very prominent, very involved in the community. So they had a lot of support with this business venture. Bill was a pharmacist, he was on councils. Everyone kind of knew who they were. So they ran the motel together. It was a family business for almost the entire time that it was open. And according to the Orlando Sentinel, when it opened, it was comfort and relaxation. And the Evening Star said that it was the newest and most modern motel. So it was on Colonial. And it was 2 acres. Like I said, it was East Colonial and Highland. And they tried to keep it as updated as they could. It had air conditioning, which was a huge thing back then. In 1962, they added a whole nother block of rooms. They added a swimming pool because this was before Universal and Disney World, so people were in Orlando and not Celebration Kissimmee area. So they needed nice places to stay that was pretty much in downtown. And this was that place. And if you can see in the pictures, they had twin bedrooms and the pool, and just it was very inviting and welcoming at the time. But eventually, unfortunately, it was sold and it was transformed into a Knights Inn. This ran for a while. There was a lot of burglaries, a lot of break-ins, a lot of issues, and then it was all but abandoned. So in 2002, the Park Lake Presbyterian Church, which sits right across the street from the Davis Park Motel, purchased the property for $2 million because they figured they've got a ton of parking and we need parking for our congregation. But it was also fitting because Bill and Mary Jo had been members of that church. So they have this property. It's still the Knights Inn. In 2007, the church is running everything. And in 2007, they kind of figure, all right, we're done with this. This is way too much for us to handle. So it sat vacant, and they were trying to figure out what the heck to do with this place. Well, Will Benton, who is the church organist, had an idea. He said, why don't we turn it into artist studios? There's tons of artists. We've got a huge arts culture in Orlando. Why don't we give them a place that allows 24-hour access? You can't live there, but you can be there working whenever you want. And they pitched the idea to the congregation. They absolutely loved it. So Will went over to the motel, and he cleaned out 4 hotel rooms and turned them into makeshift studios to show the congregation kind of what they were thinking and to build more excitement so that they could get funding to do the actual renovation. So to do this, they contacted UCF. They have the 3D design lab, and they had 30 teams of students that essentially created designs and models. You can see in the upper corner there. That was the winning team. They called themselves CAVO. It had already been named FAVO, which is Faith Arts Village Orlando. They called themselves CAVO, Colonial Arts Village Orlando. And that was their winning design. They were given another semester to fine-tune it and then present it to an architectural firm who did the actual architectural designs for the renovation. And prior to all of this, the kids got to see everything, so it was a really great experience for them as well, local partnership. And obviously, it worked out very well. So, shortly after the renovations, FAVO opened. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. They do First Friday, and they added Saturday. They've got food trucks, music. A lot of the artists will open their studios. There's one artist in the back. His name is Byron. He's a found object sculptor. He usually has beer. He's back by the fence if you go through around the corner. And he's always out there hanging out. But a lot of them will open their studios and they'll do workshops, demonstrations. So it's really a special place that these people can work, and it's a low rent, so it's affordable. They can be there, like I said, any time of day or night. A lot of them during COVID said that they did some of their best work during that time because they could be there and just work nonstop. They were unbothered. They get to decorate their studios. They get to paint their doors. So there's a lot of expression and that goes into it. It is run by a church, but they do not require religious artwork. They accept secular artwork. The only thing they ask is please make it family friendly if you're creating in those spaces. But when they started, their mission statement was encouraging art as an expression of faith. Faith Arts Village Orlando is a ministry of Park Lake Presbyterian Church that provides a place where the faith community and local artists can work together to share their gifts of inspiration, beauty, and spiritual expression to promote peace, understanding, and well-being in a larger community. And as I said, they're there working all the time. Go First Friday, Go First Saturday, food trucks, live music. It's actually a lot of fun. And it's just a really cool place that has a historic property, and they turned it into something that serves the arts community and just serves the community in general. So with that, we are going to pass it off to Travis.
Hello, everybody. My name is Travis Puterbaugh. I'm the curator of collections here at the Orange County Regional History Center. And I'll be discussing the film Daryl, which is based on my article, When a Data Analyzing Robot Youth Life Form Came to Orlando. You'll see, it's cool. So if you were a child in the 1980s like me, who had access to HBO, chances are you are familiar with a movie from 1985 that was filmed locally here in Orlando and throughout Central Florida. If you were a 10-year-old little boy in 1985, like I was, maybe you related a little bit too much with the story of a data analyzing robot youth life form, which I'm happy to share now with those of you who may have never heard of this 80s classic. But first, let's go back to June of 1985. As a moviegoer, you're in the midst of one of the great summer movie seasons of the decade. Rambo, First Blood Part 2, has been dominating the box office for weeks. A time travel movie starring the guy from Family Ties was just weeks from opening. Chevy Chase had Fletch and National Lampoon's European Vacation released in the same summer, if you can imagine. If you were a fan of John Travolta or Jamie Lee Curtis, Perfect was perfect for you. James Bond was back for View to a Kill, and the Brat Pack was ready to explode all over screens across America with the release of St. Elmo's Fire. And if you were a kid in Orlando, you could get dropped off at the Plaza Theater on Bumby to watch a double feature of The Goonies and Daryl, which was filmed just a few miles away. It's a hell of a time to be alive. Just 6 months earlier, in January of 1985, principal photography began on the Paramount motion picture set in the quiet Lake Cherokee Historic District of Orlando. The movie was called Daryl, and it starred Barrett Oliver as Daryl, the data-analyzing robot youth life form, disguised as a too-good-to-be-true 10-year-old boy who gets placed with a foster family. Incidentally, it was quite the summer for little Barrett Oliver, as he also played the role of the grandson in a monster hit called Cocoon. But before we go any further, let's just talk about Daryl for a minute. And be warned, there are spoilers here. If you haven't seen this movie yet, you've had 39 years, so I'm not going to apologize. Daryl is about a mysterious boy who borders on perfection. He can crush a baseball. He sets the high score at a video game called Pole Position. He plays the piano impeccably. He's neat, tidy, respectful to adults. He's able to manipulate an ATM machine to increase his foster father's bank account. He's so good at everything and without flaw that he makes his foster mother feel useless in her role as a caregiver. It takes some advice from his wisecracking best friend Turtle to tell Daryl that he needs to screw up every now and then, just enough to not get whacked, so that his parents can feel like they're making progress. What we find out is that Daryl has a computer for a brain and is the product of a secret government project designed to create a perfect soldier. This is real, this happened. So it turns out to have the real emotions and feelings of a little boy, almost like a modern version of Pinocchio. I won't tell you how it ends but the tears that you cry will be real. But if it feels like it's tacked on and comes out of nowhere, it's because the ending was reshot to favor a nicer and more believable conclusion. But I'll let you all find that out. You can stream it on Amazon Prime for $3.49. It's a good buy. It's not even 2 hours. So when conceiving this article for the community paper, I wish to focus on the impact that the production had on the Lake Cherokee Historic District. To that end, I conducted an interview with the film's supervisor and production manager, Jennifer Ogden Combs, in order to learn more about the history of the production. For Combs, it was the culmination of preparation and advanced location scouting, which began here in the summer of 1984. She recalled that the reasons for selecting Orlando as the primary base for the shoot, saying that they were looking for a town that would have an all-American feel to it, and Orlando had the perfect look for what they were trying to accomplish in the film. Although it was shot primarily here in Florida, it most certainly had the look of a film that could be set anywhere. Indeed, if you watch the film, it would take a keen eye to recognize many of the locations because the film goes out of its way to not draw attention to local landmarks, even giving the town in the movie the nondescript moniker you see of Barkington. Residents of the Lake Cherokee and Delaney Park neighborhoods, however, would instantly recognize the streets, homes, and parks which feature so prominently in the film. During her scouting visit to Orlando, Combs identified that the neighborhood would be the kind of place where Andy and Joyce, a construction foreman and a piano teacher played by actors Michael McKeon and Mary Beth Johnson, would believably live. We ended up just being in a perfect neighborhood, she said. It was a question of where we could see these characters and this family living. The white 1923 Dutch colonial home on Euclid Avenue, used in the film, as you can see here, belonged to local advertising executive Mark Barker, who said that when the producers hit Euclid, it was as if the script had been written about that street. Other locations in Darrell included Cayley Elementary School, the Great Oaks Village Children's Home, the 1887 Gunby House on Honeymoon Row, and the baseball field in Delaney Park, site of one of the film's central scenes, and in fact, one of the primary reasons Orlando was chosen as the filming location for Darrell. Combs said that she knew they had to shoot from January to March and started looking at areas where they could shoot in warmer weather because of the baseball component of the story. Combs gained experience in her career while working for legendary directors Woody Allen and Sidney Lumet, and aimed to make the process of location shooting as positive experience as possible by creating an open-door relationship with neighborhood residents and local businesses. She said that you have to be responsive to the needs of the neighborhood and the homeowners. Night shooting can be tough on a neighborhood. Lights are bright and generators are loud. Her hope was that everyone had the best experience possible while knowing that filming can be a disruptive experience. Darrell filmed not only in the Lake Cherokee area, but also included scenes shot in downtown Winter Park, the Kissimmee Gateway Airport, Epcot, Eustis, and an elaborate nighttime car chase through downtown Orlando on the East-West Expressway. The film production, whose home base during the shoot was the Harley Hotel here in downtown, employed local crew and local actors as well during the shoot. Gabrielle Kelly, who was one of the film's co-producers, said that substantial savings were made here in Florida as opposed to a major city like New York, Los Angeles, or other places. And clearly when you're making a movie, finances are very important, and that was certainly one of their experiences in Orlando, was being able to deliver a film on budget. They both raved about the talent and crew members they worked with on Darrell, and noted the importance of a positive experience as a building block for future film shoots here in Central Florida. The film industry grew exponentially in the years following the shoot with the additions of MGM and Universal Studios. In fact, camera crews would return to Delaney Park in early 1989 to film another baseball scene, this time for the Ron Howard movie, Parenthood. Combs said that how they worked with the local community can lay the groundwork not just for their production, but for what future filmmakers can do. Though not a success at the box office, the Daryl experience was a success for Orlando and remains a storied part of this community's place in pop culture. And it was a pleasure researching that for the community paper. So thank you very much. We'll now hear from Jeremy Heilman.
All right, I'm back. It's the last time, I promise. So the article that I'm covering was published in June of 2020, and it was called Cheyenne Saloon Hits the Small Screen. So the article was about the Cheyenne Saloon and Opera House that was part of Church Street Station, and more specifically, it was about the national television program that was filmed there that featured some genuine legends and superstars of country music and of early rock and roll. So Church Street Station itself was an entertainment complex created by a gentleman named Bob Snow, who many of you may have heard of. It had a significant impact on nightlife in Orlando, and I mean, that would be a huge understatement generally. But by the early 1970s, the once thriving downtown Orlando area was not quite as bustling as it once was, with many of the retail businesses migrating out of the heart of the city and people just having less and less of a reason to be downtown. In 1972, Snow began developing what would become a series of bars and restaurants centered around the Church Street Railroad Station that had operated beginning in the 1890s, but had been sort of dormant since the mid-1920s. He started with Rosie O'Grady's Good Time Emporium, which opened in July of 1974. This particular establishment had live Dixieland jazz and was quite popular right away, which allowed for more establishments to open up in the complex, including Apple Annie's Courtyard, Lily Marie's Aviator Pub and Restaurant, and Phineas Fogg's Balloon Works. So if any of you remember those from the old Church Street Station. Became its own little district where people could come and spend the whole night. They could come and maybe get dinner and then bar hop between different bars and establishments with music and live entertainment, and it was all kind of under the banner of Church Street Station. And today, that may not seem like a super revolutionary idea or a novel concept, but at the time, it was enough to make Church Street massively successful. And in the mid-1980s, it was one of the most popular attractions in Florida. I believe the fourth most popular attraction. So that's really saying something, given all the competition that we have in this area. But it wasn't until 1982 that the Cheyenne Saloon opened its doors, and immediately it became a real crown jewel of the whole Church Street district. The simplest explanation is that it was a country western bar, but it was a lot more than that. Although country bars have kind of long since had a place in American culture, there was a real surge in popularity for them at the time. A new wave of country music had really gained traction in the early 1980s, and the genre was really exploding at that time. In terms of live performances, many of the early pioneers of country music were still around, and many new stars were being made. So it was a really exciting time for places like the Cheyenne. Also, the notion of a night out at a honky-tonk was immortalized in the 1980 film Urban Cowboy with Deborah Winger and John Travolta, which I wouldn't imagine that if you came here today to hear about Orlando history, you would have thought that you heard John Travolta mentioned twice. But it is important because, you know, this movie, it may sound silly at the time, but or sounds silly now, but at the time it was a real sort of cultural phenomenon and made people very interested in both country music and these sort of honky-tonk bars. So it was a really, special and sort of golden era for establishments like the Cheyenne. What made the Cheyenne Saloon really stand out even among these type of establishments was that it was just so aesthetically impressive. There were several levels of ornate woodwork and stained glass and these really opulent chandeliers, which you can kind of see in this photo here. Almost the entire place was made out of golden oak, which was reclaimed from an Ohio barn from the 1880s, which That's at least what the publicity at the time stated. But it was really beautiful regardless of where it came from, and I think that anyone who has been there would really say the same thing. It was so nice, in fact, that the idea was floated to use it as the location for a television show. A new cable station called the Nashville Network, or TNN, began in 1983 and offered country music-oriented programming. Filming the show would be beneficial for all parties involved because it would give TNN a unique location to film. It would give the Cheyenne Saloon and Church Street in general quite a bit of notoriety to a national audience, and both parties would have some leverage to book some really significant acts and entertainers for both the crowd at home and the crowd in person. Something that comes up a lot with sort of the history of Central Florida, especially in the 1980s, as Travis mentioned, was all the sort of production going on at the time. There was definitely a drive to attract both film and television production to the area. And there were quite a few memorable projects that filmed at the time in this area, but never really came to the kind of full potential that a lot of people had hoped for at the time. But when we talk about this, a lot of times these sort of major projects get brought up. But a production like the show that was filmed at Church Street Station also play a big part of this. And I think in order to, the hope that this would thrive as a production hub, you needed these different size projects going on. So it wasn't all going to be necessarily blockbuster movies, but when you were filming something regularly year after year, that kind of benefited all the infrastructure around. So you're talking about, all the equipment rental houses and the catering and the administrative and all those things. So when you're talking about sort of developing a thriving infrastructure, you really need to keep all of those people working. And I think there are a lot of smaller projects that maybe don't get their due, such as this particular show. So it was important. And even though it didn't really pan out the way that maybe some of the people in that business would have hoped, it was an important part of that sort of business as it was at the time. Sorry, here. So the series debuted in 1983, and it was called Church Street Station, even though it filmed specifically at the Cheyenne Saloon. It took a crew of over 30 people to put all the necessary production equipment into the saloon. Bink Binkley, which is a really cool name, was the producer who worked for TNN, who kind of headed up the show, and he offered some insight during an interview with the Orlando Sentinel, saying that they really loved the venue because it would have taken millions of dollars for them to produce an environment which already existed here in Orlando. In order to save time and money, full seasons of the show were filmed within a couple of weeks, and there you can see an ad kind of for the lineup for one of the particular sort of filming sessions. Logistically, this was a lot for the crew to be able to coordinate, to get many touring acts in and out of the venue in such a short window of time. There's not a lot of, time dedicated to rehearsal or really much margin for error at all, but they made it work and produced a really quality program. It was 30 minutes long, and it was all about the musical performances. It didn't feature interviews or any kind of supplemental material or anything like that, but it did have something unique, a show intro that leaned very heavily into the fact that it was filmed here in Orlando. You would see the opening shot of the Church Street Station kind of train, the locomotive there, and then you'd see aerial views of Lake Eola and downtown Orlando, and then they would have a shot outside the Cheyenne Saloon, which generally had some kind of interesting way for the performer to arrive. Sometimes it would be like an antique car would pull up on the block there outside the club, or somebody would walk across the bridge that kind of goes over Church Street you see there. There were even times where people arrived via hot air balloon, but regardless of kind of the actual mode of transportation, the performer would kind of walk in through the crowd as they were already waiting, and their band was playing, and they would kind of just walk right up on stage and start performing. So it really felt like a kind of exciting thing and something that you would want to be there for in person. And really a lot of what they showed was Tourism Bureau's sort of dream come true, and that it was an audience that was there to sort of watch the stars on television, but it really hammers home that it takes place in Orlando and that this was a really exciting place to be. And I think like the idea that you see something on TV, whether it be like the New Year's Eve in New York City, as we just saw a few days ago, a lot of people, that's their first exposure to a place, and it kind of plants the seed that it's a place that they want to go. And I think that, a lot of people got some really positive thoughts of what Orlando was outside of the theme parks. And, for Church Street Station to be an attraction that drew people who were down here for, to go to Disney or something like that, all the way over to downtown is a real accomplishment and would certainly influence the future sites of some entertainment districts like Pleasure Island or Universal City Walk or that kind of thing. So really cool that, it kind of plays into a lot of what was going on at the time here in Orlando. To say that the list of performers are impressive is pretty much an understatement. For those of you who are familiar with country music, you see up here on the screen George Jones, who is one of the true icons of country music, and Tammy Wynette, an early queen of country music and massively influential on a lot of folks that came after her. But just kind of running down the list of some of the people that performed, some recognizable names. Charlie Pride, who really broke down barriers for African-American performers in country music. Little Jimmy Dickens, who was a staple of the Grand Ole Opry for over 60 years. Roger Miller, who performed the classic King of the Road and was also the narrator for Disney's animated Robin Hood and contributed some songs to that soundtrack, so another kind of Disney tie there. Jerry Lee Lewis, one of the first real rock and roll stars. Carl Perkins, another originator of rock music, best known for his song Blue Suede Shoes. And a lot of up-and-coming performers at the time in the 80s, like Travis Tritt, Joe Diffie, Alan Jackson, appeared on the show as well. It ran from 1984 to 1987, and then again from 1989 to 1992. But unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and by the early 90s, TNN kind of changed its format a bit. Its parent company, Gaylord Broadcasting, purchased the rival Country Music Television, which is CMT, which still exists, in 1991, and the majority of the music-related content shifted away from TNN and on to CMT. The final first-run episode of the show aired in 1992, June of 1992. So you may recognize also the Gaylord Broadcasting is the same sort of parent company that operates the Gaylord Hotel here in Central Florida, so another kind of tie there. TNN itself changed too in kind of its focus on sort of Southern culture, I guess, would be what the format changed to. And then, think of like outdoor shows, variety shows, game shows, all with sort of a touch of that sort of Southern flavor. In 2000, they dropped that element and became more of a general interest and became the national network. And then in 2003, it became Spike TV, which some of you may remember. It was a very, focused on male-oriented programming, which is a very much a product of its time. And then in 2008, Spike TV became the Paramount Network. So if you watch any shows like Yellowstone or anything like that, some very popular shows are on that channel. So that all dates back to the Nashville Network, which started in 1983. So there are over 100 episodes of the show. They're not widely available, so you can't watch them on any major streaming service, and full episodes aren't available on any kind of commercial media like DVDs or anything like that, at least to my knowledge. But as with like a lot of old television shows that aren't necessarily the most popular, the rights become very complicated, and because there's not a ton of revenue to be made with them, they kind of sit in purgatory. So there are a handful of these performances you can find on YouTube. When this article came out in 2020, there were a lot more, so it kind of fluctuates as to what is available. It may be kind of hit or miss, but if you're interested in this show or in the Cheyenne Saloon, I definitely think it's worth checking out. As for the Cheyenne Saloon itself, it would continue to operate in the manner that it had since '83 until 2001. And since then, there's been a lot of sort of start-stops with the Church Street Station complex. And, although it was once a thriving attraction, the other beloved establishments like Rosie O'Grady became other bars and restaurants and different things. But the Cheyenne is unique in that it has kind of maintained the same look and feel as it did all the way back in 1983. So you can see from the show on the right there, that's a still from the actual Church Street Station show on TNN, and then this is just a couple of days ago outside. So all that woodwork and all the beautiful chandeliers and all that is still in there. You can still see it. The venue opens up occasionally. They do a lot of special events, and there have been some attempts to kind of reopen over the years. But, unfortunately, it's never kind of reestablished itself as like a daily or nightly sort of event kind of space and everything. So you can still go peek in the windows. And like I said, if you have an opportunity to check it out, it's definitely worth it. If you're a music fan, I think it's fun to kind of be in there and think about all the notable performances that have taken place. And it really is kind of the only remaining piece of Church Street that you can, take a look at and see what made it so special for all those years. So if you're interested in any of these, we'll get to questions in just a second. So if you want to check out any of the articles that any of us spoke about or any of the other ones over the years, and like I said, there's close to 90 different articles, you can visit yourcommunitypaper.com. They have all of them up there. There's a lot of really great stuff on there, and it's an excellent way to connect not only just to local history, but also to keep up with what's going on in the community and what makes this place such a happening area. So with that, I guess we will go ahead and open up for questions now. I don't know if anyone has written any questions already. No? Okay. Go ahead with your question here. Mm-hmm. Sure. Wow. So I'm going to repeat this so that they can hear. So you have a friend whose husband played Groucho Marx as a waiter at Church Street. At Rosie O'Grady's. Cool. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So she's sharing with us that the house band that played with a lot of these performers, she's friendly with that family, and they weren't even aware that you can kind of see some of this still. So, yeah, so a lot of the big name performers are not. I guess there's probably some publishing or sort of record label red tape with a lot of that, but you can definitely get some samplings of what the show was like and kind of see the intro and that kind of thing. But it would be really cool if they were released in some official way, but until then I guess we'll kind of have to settle for what's available. Yes, sir.
Question for Ms. Gunter.
Yeah, Debbie, if you want to come on up here.
Just curious, what kind of traffic are you getting on that versus the engagement you get on print? How important is the website?
So that's a great question, and we wish we could track the print, right? Because wouldn't that be amazing? We get, I believe Nick is better to answer this question. How many visits are we getting a month on the website? About 22,000, I think, something like that. Yeah. And then we also have newsletters that go out twice a week. One is news, and we'll share like the article, the History Center article and things like that for people who might not get the hard copy. But we do really well with through our newsletters and then the website and social media and all of that. So yeah, I wish we could track the print. Wouldn't that be great? But we go through all of them. We print 15,000 of them a month, and they're gone. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, go for it. So the question was, were there any articles that we've not been able to do for whatever reason, not been able to find enough material or something like that? I mean, I don't know if I can speak for all of the staff, but I think we're constantly hearing a lot of really interesting pieces of local history. I think sometimes those are very sort of short, anecdotal things, so that they can't always turn into kind of an article. It doesn't have like a real narrative or story or anything like that. But I think for the most part, people, when our staff gets interested in something or, there's a thread to follow, we usually do a pretty good job of kind of finding a way to share that story, whether that be in a community paper article or in a different kind of way, like a social media post or something like that. So, and if you want to visit thehistorycenter.org, you can find information about how to donate and our collecting efforts and all that kind of thing. So anything else? I think we're running up against time here. But yeah, so thank you for joining us today. We really hope that you enjoyed the program. Supporting our program is one of the best ways that you can support the History Center in general, and we really appreciate you being here today. And as I mentioned, if you want more information about our programs or anything else that the History Center is doing, please visit thehistorycenter.org. But I hope you enjoyed the program, and we look forward to seeing you back soon. So thank you.